Shmai guys and girls, JonnyVR here with my hindsight review of Doctor Who Series 12, and I'm going to go over a few things such as my scores and what I rated each episode. I'm going to adjust a few that I thought were a bit odd. I'm going to go through stuff about the story arcs that we had this season, and also I'm going to talk about the ratings and why I think that they're not as bad as people say or what articles say online, and also the future and what I think is going to come next and what I want to see next. So I don't know how long this is going to be, so I'll put timestamps in the information section below so that if you wanted to watch just any one bit, you can skip to that. Make sure you click like and subscribe if you like this channel. Thanks again for everyone who's been watching every week as I've given a review of each episode. It's been great, and hopefully I get to do this again next time we get Doctor Who. To start off, I wanted to talk about my scores and make a few adjustments. I didn't want to give myself sort of a freebie that I could just change scores to whatever I wanted them to be. So I give myself sort of a plus or minus 0.5. So when I was adjusting these scores, I was like, right, I'm either going to add 0.5, take away 0.5, or leave it as it is. The first episode, Spyfall Part 1, I give 8.7, and I've decided that I'm going to leave it as it is because I really liked Spyfall Part 1. I like the sort of the setting of it. I like the sort of the mystery, the build-up. I liked the Kasavin. I liked the Master reveal. You know, I thought the cliffhanger was brilliant with the reveal of the Master, the crashing of the airplane and the Doctor stuck in the other dimension. Yeah, I thought it was a really strong episode, to start off the season. For Spyfall Part 2, I rated it 7.5. I'm going to keep it as it is. Orphan 55. Now, I rated this 6.7, so it's going down to 6.2. Again, maybe 6.2 is still too high, but as an episode, I don't know how this was made. It's really odd. I think it's going down, but who knows? I like to think of this episode that Ed Hymes, I like to think that the BBC went to him and said, look, Ed Hymes, I really want you to write an episode about climate change, and this is the message we want to give to people. And Ed Hymes thought, I really wanted to write my own episode and I didn't want to have anything behind it. So he made an episode like this, and like the whole thumb-sucking thing was sort of a dig at the BBC. But again, that's pure speculation. I just like to think that because, you know, it was a bit of an odd episode. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, I rated that 8.8. I'm going to leave it at 8.8 because I really enjoyed this episode. I think 8.8 puts it at my highest rated episode, just beating Spyfall Part 1 of this series. And looking at the episodes, I would say that I did enjoy this episode the most. It was really good. I loved the setting. I loved Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. I liked their dynamic, and I thought the alien threat was really cool. Like, although they were sort of a monster of the week, I think they were, you know, better than your average monster of the week. Yeah, I just loved the story. I thought it was really good. Fugitive of the Jadoon, I rated this 7.2. When I rewatched it, I thought it was a lot better than I'd given it credit for, so this is going up to 7.7. The reason behind this, that I think I rated it low, was because there was a lot of information in it to start off with, but also like the return of the Jadoon, doing like everything that we've seen them do before. The return of Captain Jack, which of course was brilliant, and his entrance was excellent, but I was really cautious that maybe Chris Chibnall was throwing in a Jack cameo and using the Jadoon, which all make us think of the David Tennant era, which pretty much everybody loves, to sort of cover up like this sort of the massive sort of game changer that Ruth was actually a doctor as well. So I was really cautious that there was you like sort of filling us with nostalgia. Overall, it's a very good episode, and it's gone up to 7.7. Praxis, I rated 7.3. I kind of feel like I have to put this down as well. 6.8. I think is going to be the new score. It sort of struggles almost like Orphan 55 with its huge multitude of characters. It doesn't quite get there. It's too many characters, I think. And although some of them were strong, some of them were very forgettable. I think there's the whole thing that there's clearly a message behind this. And the fact that we've had two environmentally sort of themed episodes dedicated in this series, it's pretty old. It gets boring very fast. Can You Hear Me? I rated at 7.8, and I feel like I have to put this down as well to 7.3. Had this huge problem that I loved the episode, and I loved the villains in the episode. I loved their setup, but they were just dealt with far too easily. You can't just call them gods and then just sort of deal with them in literally like 20 seconds. I think it demanded a bit of more of a clever end to those villains, or a cleverer way of dealing with those villains. So I'm putting that down to 7.3. But I enjoyed the episode. Haunting of Villa Diodati, I rated as 6.9. I rewatched this one, and on the second watch, I really thought that the second half of the episode was a lot better, where it picks up with the lone Cyberman, and it's a brilliant setup for the two-part finale. But the first half of the episode, I even the second time, I found just a little bit boring. Twice I watched it, and twice I was sort of felt bored watching it. The whole first half of the episode as well, it's the idea that Shelley was the ghost behind everything. It was a good plot twist, but it was dealt with in a really funny way. Like, if you look at the things in the episode, like the mysterious things, like the very start, the door handle moved, and then the vase smashes against the wall. And you get the ghost appearing to Ryan and Yaz, and then you get the sort of the flashback where you see it was actually Shelley the whole time, and sort of it doesn't fit. Like, the order that they show things happening without Shelley is different from the order that they show in the flashbacks with Shelley, and I think that it just made for a really bit of a confusing way of a generally good idea. The skeleton hand and the skull played quite a bit of. It was quite heavily featured in the first half of the episode, and it was never clear. They just put him once it was in the crypt. They put it in a glass jar or something. They don't deal with it. There was no explanation until right at the very end, where Graham says in one line that it's very easy to miss that the Siberium was causing that as well. It was just a bit odd, but I think it's staying as it is, 6.9. Ascension of the Cybermen, I rated 8.5, and I'm going to leave it at 8.5 because I thought it was a very good setup for the finale. I liked how it felt sort of a universal scale, where there was lots of different places to go, lots of different spaceships and planets. And again, the end with Gallifrey and the Master coming through is a great ending. I really liked that episode, and the Cybermen were really cool. And then there was the last one, the Timeless Children. I rated this at 7, and I'm going to leave it at 7. And the only reason, I think, is the Master, because the Master was brilliant in this episode. I rewatched it, and this episode totally belongs to the Master. Like, he just goes to another level, and he wipes the floor with everyone else. Like, one of the key moments is when the Doctor finds out who her past and everything. She has the bomb with the death particle. She goes to the Master to confront him, and she has this sort of big inspiring speech about how she's been given the gift of herself, and now she's more than ever before. And then the master just turns around and says, "We'll do it then, go use the death particle." And Jodie Whittaker, you can see in her face that she wasn't expecting that at all. And then after that, the master then reinforces that she knows nothing about her past, and there's nothing the Doctor can do about it. So the master just totally won that confrontation. Her speech about who she was meant nothing, because it was totally flipped around. The Ko-Sharmas thing, I was really thinking about that, how he just shows up and the Doctor just lets him die for her. And in this moment, like literally the only things that the Doctor says in this moment is no and but, and then after that she runs off. There's nothing else, because Ko-Sharmas just totally tells her to leave, and she does. He had a good death, but like it was too easy for the Doctor to sort of let that happen. So, you know, there's a lot in this episode that, you know, is a bit odd. Overall, it was entertaining, I guess. Yes, it had that sort of major change, but I think possibly over time it'll get better for fans, because I think the show will move on, and you know, we just got to deal with that. But I'm keeping it a 7 because of the master, and I think Sacha Dhawan's master is great, and this episode is awesome for him. So yeah, that's my review of the scores, and now we'll go on to the next part of this video where I'll talk about the story arcs. And I say story arcs because there was a few, and obviously there was none in series 11, and this series was going to have a story arc, but there ended up being a few, so at least 2, and then that one sort of semi-story arc, and I'll explain this now. So we'll start off with the Timeless Child story arc, and this started off in Spyfall Part 1 and Part 2, especially in Part 1 where the master says to the Doctor that everything you think you know is a lie, and then in Part 2 we get the reveal that Gallifrey has been destroyed, and all of Time Lord's society has been built on the lie of the Timeless Child. And I think this is a really good setup for the rest of the series. But it's like, did we know that it was barely going to be picked up in any of the other episodes? You know, there was nothing in the other episodes to sort of keep it going until Fugitive of the Judoon. Because in Orphan 55, you just had that brief moment of the Doctor looking, you know, sad or something like that, or, you know, the companions notice that the Doctor is, you know, just moping around. And then in the Nikola Tesla episode, this Queen of the Skithra says to her, "Have you ever seen a dead planet?" And there's a moment there that, you know, that reminds you of the Gallifrey's been destroyed. But again, there's nothing added apart from the fact that it's referencing that there is a story arc this series, until Fugitive of the Judoon, where we're introduced to Ruth, who turns out to be the Doctor. And there's all sorts of information here that, you know, she has never seen a sonic screwdriver, and she hasn't seen Gallifrey destroyed as the other Time Lord. So this really pushes the story arc forward, and it did so in a really good way, as, you know, raising more questions. And it also introduced the second story arc of this series, which was the Cybermen story arc. When Jack appeared, obviously he gave the warning about the lone Cyberman, don't give it what it wants. But to deal with the Timeless Child arc still, in Praxis there was pretty much nothing, and in Can You Hear Me, all we had was that the fact that the Doctor's nightmare was to do with the Timeless Child. Again, the same way as Orphan 55 and Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, there was nothing added to that, only that which we've seen before. When it came to the finale, the 2-part finale, especially in Ascension of the Cybermen, there was nothing added. Gallifrey was destroyed again, we see the Master again, but there was no answers, it was just more questions. The only time that we really got answers to the Timeless Child story arc was in the Timeless Children. What I thought about this is that it was pretty crazy, because the Timeless Child was first mentioned way back when in the Ghost Monument, and it's been like almost a year and a half, and we haven't heard anything else since. I like the idea of being able to figure it out, being able to have extra clues week by week. So that's something I missed about this story arc, is that with regards to the Timeless Child itself, there was nothing really that we could go off. There was just the addition of a new doctor and a whole load of new questions. The only time we really got answers was in the finale. Obviously there was speculation, but there was nothing concrete to add every week. Picking up on the Cyberman story arc, this was picked up in The Haunting of Villa Diodati, when the lone Cyberman shows up. Again, it's great setup for the finale. Ascension of the Cybermen continues that and sort of fuses in with the Master's plan in The Timeless Children. So overall, the Cybermen story arc of this series, it starts off with a tease, and then when it appears in Villa Diodati, it's great setup. Ascension of the Cybermen is a good episode. I really enjoyed that one. But then they became part of the Master's plan, and I think, again, this is where Sacha Dhawan really shines as the Master in this episode, that he can manipulate the lone Cyberman. Yes, his death was kind of quick, but overall, the Cybermen this series, I think, were pretty good. And then this sort of half semi-story arc was the climate change message. I wouldn't call it a full-on story arc, but like, it started in Orphan 55 with the introduction of the dregs. Most people thought that was sort of a one-off. But then Praxis came about and was also dealing with sort of environment stuff. And, even then it was look after the planet. So it kind of continues this theme of environment. And even, I wouldn't have called it a story arc at all, except for the fact that when Ryan is having a nightmare, a dreg shows up, and there's fire everywhere because his old friend is saying that while you were out traveling, the world was burning. So this sort of climate change trilogy, I will call it, of Orphan 55, Praxis, and Can You Hear Me, it's not really a story arc, but it's a continuing theme, and it's something that, I don't know, it just depends. If people were like, oh my gosh, this climate change storyline is so great, I'm really invested in this, then there was potential for the BBC to continue to write a climate change story. But I think the overwhelming response is like insanely negative, and people don't like the message because it feels very, very forced. So they could just leave it there and never touch it again. We don't know. We'll have to see if that has any impact in later series, or whether they just leave it as it is. I personally think they should leave it, because it's only gonna anger more fans. Overall, I think if you looked at all these sort of story arcs, everything that's going on in this series, the Timeless Child, the Cybermen, I guess you could say the climate change thing on the side, it really does. I like how it feels that there's multiple things going on, and we don't know if they're all connected. Like, I totally thought that the Cybermen wasn't gonna be connected in any way to Gallifrey or the Timeless Child, and I thought that when they sort of teased the Timeless Child, I thought that they were gonna continue with the Cybermen story until the series finale, and then have more Timeless Child mysteries going on into series 13. But there's a lot going on, and it really does feel like a big universe when you've got the cyber war happening out in the stars, and climate change thing happening here on Earth, and also the Timeless Child thing going on in the Doctor's life and on Gallifrey, and for the Master. With the story arcs in general, I think probably nothing really changed. I think that for the Timeless Child story arc and the destruction of Gallifrey again, the Master used the Time Lord's bodies to make Cybermen, but I always thought, since he revealed that Gallifrey had been destroyed, that there was never, or there was always the possibility to write in that, not every Time Lord was killed in the Master's sort of destruction, and they could always bring the Time Lords back, or at least a part of them back like that. The story arcs of this series have been, all right. I like how they've felt that it was a big universe, and it sets up a whole lot more for the next series. So I'm going to talk about the ratings now. How lots of people, and there's been lots of articles saying, the ratings are going down. It's time for Doctor Who to be cancelled. I don't think that this is a problem, and I'm going to explain. I think that at least in some aspects as well, the ratings for this series have been better than ever in some aspects. So the first thing I wanted to say is the fact that Piers Wenger, who is the controller of BBC Drama Commissioning, actually said in an interview with Radio Times that Doctor Who is a long way off from being rested. So right from the BBC himself, like, it's not going anywhere, so I don't think they're worried about the ratings at all. I can put a link to that interview in the description, so if you want to check it out, you can. First of all, I think that tells me that Doctor Who is going to keep going, and there would need to be something pretty dramatic for them to cancel Doctor Who, especially at this point. The other thing that I think is good for Doctor Who is that it's not just your average TV show. It has been going on for like 57 years, and it is generational. So my parents watched Doctor Who when they were little, and probably people's grandparents watch Doctor Who. Possibly when I have a kid, they're gonna watch Doctor Who in the future. It's that sort of a TV show. Although it was cancelled before, it's a TV show that very much can continue and presumably will continue for the time being. And the other thing is as well, it's very much iconic. There's a lot of money that gets made by the merchandise and things like that. So that they're gonna want to keep Doctor Who running for that as well. But let's talk about the actual ratings themselves, and you can look at these. I'm going to be talking about the overnight ratings because I think that gives you a really good idea of how many people actually want to watch this and how many people tune in every week. It started off with 4.88 million viewers in the first episode. In the second episode, it went down to 4.6 million, and then further again to 4.19, followed by just over 4 million, and then it went up to 4.2 million. I'm going to pause there for a second because this already shows that they've got 4 million viewers every week will tune in, and that's pretty much, I think that's enough to keep a show going. Like, I think the only way they'll look at these and think badly about them is to compare them with like the David Tennant era, where they had like 7 million plus viewers every week, and they'll probably be like, oh, I wish it was that high still. But what I think is crazy is that over the course of the series, there was little variation every week. So if you continue, episode 6 had 3.97 million overnight, episode 7 3.81 million overnight, episode 8 3.86, episode 9 3.71, and episode 10 3.78. So throughout the series, there was around about 4 million every week. Very stable, and I think that that's what the BBC will look at this and think, right, we've got stable viewing figures here. Because, for example, for series 11, you started off with something like 8.2 million overnight in the first episode, and by the end of the series there was 5.15 tuned in for the New Year's special, and that's a whole lot of loss. And also for series 10, you had episodes where, for example, Empress of Mars had 3.58 million overnight. The next episode was The Eaters of Light, and it had 2.89 million viewers. So they lost nearly 700,000 viewers from one week to the next, and even more so for The Pyramid at the End of the World, followed by The Lie of the Land. And this went from 4.01 million to 3.01 million, so they lost 1 million viewers in the course of 1 week. But again, I think that there were sporting events on that day, which meant that more people were likely to watch sport instead of Doctor Who. But this kind of fluctuations, they didn't have in series 10 at all. On average, you lost 2.7% each week, and there was no massive gains, there was no massive drops. So I think that what that tells the BBC is that, especially because they aired this sort of the start of the year from January to early March, that they found a good time of the year where there's not much on not much sport on that people would rather tune into. And I think that tells them that they've got a good slot for Doctor Who in early January. Also, the ratings for this series, because it sort of stayed around 4 million, from 4.88 million in the first episode to 3.78 million in the last episode, you've lost around 1.1 or 1.2 million, with an average of 132,000 viewers every week. That's it's almost to be expected. I think it's always expected that there will be less people from episode 1 will stick with it to the end. So I don't think this will come as for a surprise. But the fact that by the end of series 11 they lost 3 million and it sort of ended around the 5 million mark, and now they've got around 4 million every week, shows that I think it's sort of stable, and like they would need something dramatic to lower that. Like, for example, this is another reason why I think the ratings are a good thing for the BBC, or they'll be very happy with that, is the fact that Orphan 55 was watched by 4.19 million people overnight. And given that it was such a controversial episode, generally fans hated it and critics didn't like it much either. So the fact that the next week 4.04 million tuned in again, you've lost next to nothing. And by the next episode, you're up to 4.21 million, which was even more than Orphan 55. And that was the Fugitive of the Jadoon episode. So I think the BBC will look at that and think that if they put an episode out that was as hated as Orphan 55, it's not going to do any real damage, to the ratings at least, because they'll always have this sort of 4 million people who will watch. And I think this is it's sort of genius, because the fact that Orphan 55 came after the first 2 episodes, which a lot of people liked, and the fact that Praxis came out after Fugitive of the Jadoon, which had the return of the Jadoon, the return of Captain Jack, and this massive reveal of the Doctor, the Ruth Doctor, the fact that they put that out after these episodes, it's almost genius. It's almost like they wanted to put it there, because, if they had like Orphan 55 followed by Praxis followed by Can You Hear Me, all these episodes with messages behind them, I think people would have easily given up. So I think overall, I think Doctor Who is safe. I think the ratings don't really mean a lot, and I think that they are actually all right for the BBC, and I think they'll be more than happy with it. And because the thing is as well, times change, more people stream now, so BBC iPlayer is always going to add an extra million on, and the consolidated one even more so. So I think the ratings are okay and more than enough to carry Doctor Who on. If the worst comes to worst, say Doctor Who drops to 2 million every week, the BBC could then look at that and think, something needs to change. And the fact that 8.2 million tuned in for Jodie Whittaker's debut overnight and consolidated 10.96 million viewers tuned in to see Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. They had this whole article that 10.96 million was more than any episode since the revival in 2005. That will tell them that there's people out there who will watch Doctor Who if there's a change. Like, for example, if they announced that Jodie Whittaker was going to leave, which she probably will someday, and or Chris Chibnall will leave and a new showrunner will take over, there's a whole sort of pool of people who would be interested in seeing that. They've just lost a lot from sort of day one. If Chris Chibnall had captured all this 10.96 million people with his writing and with this series, then the ratings probably would have stayed higher. Who knows? But I think they're okay for now, and given that we're definitely getting a Series 13 and Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker are back for it, we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Now for the final part, I'm going to talk about the future, and they already announced that filming was set to go underway the end of this year, and that would put it on par for an autumn 2021 release date for Series 13, which is sort of when we had the same time of the year we had Series 11. Again, this is it's going to be a long wait, but at least we've got the special sort of around the holiday period of this year. Already they've sort of asked the questions that probably will be dealt with in Series 13, and probably it'll heavily feature the Division, this mysterious Time Lord branch that can meddle in time that the Doctor was supposedly a part of in her previous life. Probably they'll deal with that in the series. I think the cliffhanger will almost definitely be solved in Revolution of the Daleks, which is the next special, because the fact that she's in a prison now, she's got to get out in early in that episode. So the fact they're going to deal with that pretty quickly and then probably focus on the other parts like the Division in Series 13. I'm looking forward to the potential of having Captain Jack back again and meeting with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, because the actor himself had said that he would come back at the tip of a hat. So I think his return is a guarantee considering how well it went down, but again, we'll just have to wait and see. Doctor Who Series 12 was very good at surprising people, so I think it would be good if he just showed up when you least expect him. But it would be hopeful. It would be hopeful and really good if he could stay for longer. Also, the other things that picked up sort of may continue into the next series. The Master, again, I'd love to see him back, because at the end of The Timeless Children, when the death particle explodes, you can hear him saying to the Cyber Masters, "Come on, all of you in here now." So I don't think we've seen the last of them either. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the dregs and the sort of the climate change storyline, they could pick that up if they wanted to, but I think if they do more episodes dedicated to this theme, that people will really get bored of it. Also, with the return of Captain Jack, I hope that they could bring back Torchwood for another series, or at least another spin-off or something like that, because it would really help waiting like these huge gaps now between series if they had a spin-off to go in between those gaps. And I think with the positive reaction to Jack returning, and also the fact that BBC iPlayer has put all of Torchwood now online so you can watch that, and John Barrowman on his Instagram posted that it was up, and he said if lots of people watch it, then maybe it will tell the BBC that to pick it up for another series. I want that. I want a spin-off in the Doctor Who universe, just so that we can have something to keep us entertained before the new series comes out. So again, hopefully they can do something about that. Chris Chibnall has sort of a 5-year plan, and he said for Series 12 we were in the phase 2 of this plan. If we had Series 13 in the expected autumn 2021 sort of window, that would sort of lead to an identical situation to Series 11 and Series 12, which would lead to a sort of a theoretical Series 14 in January 2023. If anything is to go by these last two series. Bear in mind the 60th anniversary is coming up pretty fast. The 60th anniversary would land on the 23rd of November 2023, which would be the November after the theoretical Series 14. I don't know, but if you think of Chibnall's 5-year plan as sort of 5 years from October 2018, his 5-year plan would end October 2023, by which point the 60th theoretical special would have been filmed. So I think that it's possible that Chris Chibnall will start building towards the 60th, maybe in a theoretical 14. I think that Jodie would stay for the Series 14, potentially regenerate in the 60th, and leave along with Chris Chibnall. Again, total speculation here, just because if we had Series 14 in January 2023, followed by the 60th, which presumably would bring back multiple previous Doctors. I think it would be very odd for Jodie to leave after series 13 only to return in the 60th. Like it almost seems too short. So I think that it's possible that we'll get a 60th written by Chris Chibnall with Jodie Whittaker, sort of maybe it's the last episode, and we get the return of maybe David Tennant, Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith, who knows, maybe even Christopher Eccleston. But we'd have this multi-Doctor story which would end up with Jodie regenerating and maybe handing over the reins to a new showrunner. That's just pure speculation, but that's what I think could happen, just because I don't think it would make sense for Jodie to leave and then immediately come back. That's my series review. Overall, I think it was better than series 11, just because it had a greater scale. It had a lot more going for it, a lot of reason to come back to find out what happens. That's all I'm gonna put in this episode. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this review series, if you like this channel, make sure you click like and subscribe. We are doing a giveaway when we reach 1,000 subs. We're giving away Comic-Con tickets to a convention that we'll be going to. So if you like this channel, subscribe, and we'll do our best to put out more content that you guys like. So thanks very much for watching. Again, huge thank you to everyone who's watched this review series. It's goodbye from me. I'll see you next time. Bye.